Hello and welcome to my live interview today for the Victorious Souls podcast. We're a little bit late. I'm sorry for that. Facebook has changed things and it delayed a little bit as we make adjustments because technology is great when it works, and sometimes there's a learning curve, and we all know this. But as I tell you, I do everything live, so you get the bumps in the road along with all the wonderfulness because we're authentic here. I'm genuine here. I'm Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Today with a gentleman named Michael Hynes. As a teenager, he took a trip to Belfast, Ireland, but that trip resulted in him suffering from PTSD. But because he had a warrior mindset and he did the work, he healed, and now he helps other people overcome in their lives. And so welcome with me today, Michael Hynes. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the Victorious Souls podcast interview today.
Hi, Danielle. Great to be here.
And I was telling them that as a teenager, you went to Belfast, Ireland, which resulted in PTSD for you. But before we get into that, will you share with us a little bit about Michael Hynes? Who is Michael Hynes before this trip and before all these things we're going to get into? Give us a little bit of history.
Yeah, I'll give you a little short version here. There is a bit of a long version at home. So, born in Scarborough, Canada, and grew up in Mississauga, effectively. My mom came from Ireland in 1967, and my dad was of Irish descent. So he grew up in Toronto. And also, we're going back a bit. I'm 50 now. So he spent some time in France and spent some time in Moncton, New Brunswick on Air Force bases shortly after World War II. They met 1969. They got married. 1971, I was born. I had a younger brother born 1973, and we grew up in suburban Mississauga. I was a smart kid. I was a clever kid. I loved sports. I loved swimming. Back in those days, all our parents had to do for a vacation was make sure there was a swimming pool or a lake, and nothing else mattered. We'd go splash and play and all those things. I was quite good at school. So around about grade 3, I was identified as gifted. And so was in a gifted program, took a bit, but, through most of grade school. And loved hockey. I know that's probably cliche, but Toronto Maple Leafs were the thing. And, I think my first initiation to the world of heartbreak is, the Leafs losing to the Montreal Canadiens sooner or later, every single playoffs.
Well, we have the Red Wings here, so I'm not a huge hockey fan, but I have watched a couple of games. I tended to not be able to keep my eye on the puck, but now they have technology that helps you do that.
Yeah. And that was a kind of cool thing. They started with those blue things that the puck tracker and so on and things like that. Your Red Wings kind of came back. I'm still waiting for the Leafs to win their first cup in my lifetime. So, but let's just leave that alone, right?
I hope it's not as hopeless as the Detroit Lions trying to even just win a season.
Yes. Well, you got some empathy for my situation.
I do. I don't even watch the Detroit Lions anymore. I say they're like a really bad boyfriend that keeps apologizing. I'll never do it again, but always does.
Yes.
So I can't even watch them anymore. I just can't even do it.
Right.
I've broken up. I have divorced them. Well, the men in my family don't feel the same way. Not all of them. I have nephews that are very much into them, but that's fine. They do. They can do them, and I'll do me.
You know what? If hope springs eternal, I'm all for it. But sometimes you got to be practical, right?
We can't do all things, right? We have to choose what we do.
Yeah. My dad was, back in those days, he was a sales guy. Used to sell chemicals. He had a contract cleaning business on the side. My mom was, she worked for Dominion Stores, which was a grocery store chain back then. And she worked in the head office, and they were married. Now, we had happy times. They were great together, but when they weren't, they would argue. And as time went on, the arguments got to be more and more. So that's kind of like what my home environment was like. It was always a little bit just kind of, is there going to be an argument today? Will there be a fight?
Oh,
But, I was definitely certain my parents loved me and loved each other, even if it was in a little more hot and cold kind of way, right?
well, life is messy for everyone. So, I mean, there
Yeah.
is no perfect upbringing, it just depends on how it affects you.
Yeah, and as far as living in a house in the suburbs, we were pretty normal. We were my experience as a kid, we'd go play street hockey, or we lived right near a forest, which is kind of where my happy place was. I could take my bike, ride with my friends through the forest, and it was all the same. Like, I didn't have, in a sense, anything to complain about. Now, when I go to therapy later, it's like, yeah, those quirks were a little bigger than I remember, but
And therein lies something to just pause for a moment here for you
Mhm.
listening. You may think your upbringing was so perfect or was just fine or just normal,
Mhm.
but there might be some things you might need to address. It doesn't mean your parents were terrible, doesn't mean your childhood was terrible, just means that maybe you need to do some inner work. And that's what I'm here for. And Michael has things he's here for, which we will get to in this interview.
Absolutely. And I do think, if listeners, people listening in, it's completely okay to, say in my case, have a relationship that's maybe less volatile. And so I had to do some learning on how to relate to somebody I love in
Mhm.
a calmer, quieter way, and not be hot and cold and up and down. Right? And life gets much, much easier when you do, So
Yes, yes.
more about that later. If
All righty. Well, in 1988, you went to Belfast. I have never been to Ireland, like I was telling you ahead of time. That's someplace I would like to go.
Yeah.
Since COVID, I'm not so sure. I'm a little more hesitant. And I went to a foreign country right before COVID, which when I got back, I about kissed the ground. So my foreign travel is a little hesitant, but I still want to go. But you got to go, you were only 16. What took you there and then what happened there?
So, just one piece before that. So, my mom was born and raised in Ireland,
Mhm.
and so we would go. Her majority of her family still lived in Belfast at that point in time, and we would go basically every other year because she'd be going home, and
Wow.
I'd meet my grandmother and my cousins and aunts and uncles, and so we would go every 2 years, give or take.
Wow.
So
I'm
I
so
have.
jealous.
So this wasn't a one-off thing. Like, this is my family, my connections, and to this day, if I go to, it was now my uncle's house, but was my grandmother's house at the time, it's just, I'm just flooded with good memories, and it's like, this is like my home away from home.
Oh, how wonderful. It's good to have home away from home and good memories, especially when it was connected to a bad one in there.
Yes, and then then you get to what happens, and well, effectively, to answer your first question, now we've got more background.
We
um
can go back and forth. That's fine. I mean, we're
yeah,
having a conversation. This
I
isn't
hope
like
I
I'm
haven't
writing a
confused the
journalistic
heck out of.
op on you.
Yeah. Hopefully not everybody's confused. So I'm 16. Um, we get phone calls, we turn on the news. My uncle has been killed in what was effectively a terrorist attack in the Milltown Cemetery. So he was at a funeral for two IRA members. It then comes out that he was an IRA member. And while he's at this funeral, a man attacks the funeral. They're outside at the burial site with grenades and guns. So he's shooting into the crowd and throwing grenades. My uncle runs towards him and is shot in the heart and killed pretty much instantly as he goes to try and stop the attacker.
Oh, what a warrior. Running toward, just like firemen and policemen. Oh my goodness, and other soldiers just running
And
toward the danger.
and that's it. I mean, in different circumstances, he would have been given a medal, and the place and times and what was going on in the world then, he was not. Right. So we, had to find flights, and got over to Ireland, where there's a wake and just a ton of grief. It was so unexpected.
Yeah.
I forget how old he was, but he's not even 30, as far as I remember.
Oh, wow. So
It was
young.
really tragic,
Yeah.
right? At his funeral, and there are thousands of people, so I actually read at the funeral mass, and we're all in a deep state of grief and shock. as you kind of are in any situation. But this one
Yeah,
was,
it's a mass shooting had taken place at a funeral where you're already grieving.
yep, yeah, and that's where it was at. At this funeral, two British soldiers, which we didn't know at the time, drove past security checkpoints and drove at the crowd. Now, everybody who was there was convinced that this was going to be another terrorist attack, and maybe the car was going to hit people, or maybe they're going to open up shooting. Like, we didn't know what to think of it.
Oh yeah.
Because there's so many people, and I guess fortunately the car stopped, tried to reverse out of there, but they were surrounded by some other cars who were in the procession. Then young men ran again towards what was the perceived attacker, started hitting the car, demanding questions. Then one of the occupants pulled a gun out, fired a warning shot into the air, but that was not perceived as a warning shot. It was another gun, another attacker. Crowd moved in, swarmed them, pulled them out of the car. I was still right at the very, because I was just behind the coffin. I was a witness to all of this.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And they were taken away and executed with their own guns shortly after, just within earshot. And then
Wow.
we carry on and bury my uncle, with this chaos right in the middle of it.
Wow.
And don't get me wrong, it took me a long time, but now there's two more young men have lost their lives. And the way this whole thing was presented, when I came back to Canada, I got, copies of Toronto Star, and one of my other friends had videotaped the news, but it was written up as crazed Irish mob kills two innocent victims.
Wow.
And that became the world news narrative. And so I had this experience that was completely other. I had this deep gratitude for people who had saved my life and prevented me from, being yet another victim in a very horrible situation. There was all kinds of violation, like who would attack a funeral? And now we've got it twice in a week.
Yeah.
Well, apparently people do that.
Yeah, they do all sorts of awful things, like we were saying ahead of time, the school shootings and other shootings that we've had here, and grocery store shootings, and oh my goodness, it's just awful what's happening in the world. And that was way back in 1988, but now it's even more often.
It is more common, unfortunately. And I think that's a shame, and it leaves so many people. And this is some of what people come and talk to me about, sometimes randomly. We're on a different topic, and they just say, wow, here's the worst day of my life. And sometimes it was last Thursday, like it could be with the shootings we have these days, or some of the COVID mystery deaths and those kinds of things. And I'm able to stay in that conversation because I was there. I did all kinds of healing to help myself recover.
Yeah.
But I'm okay to listen and have the conversation. What's the worst day of your life, and can I help you through it?
Wow. Yeah, I'm just seeing the parallel here with what you dealt with how they presented it, yet your truth.
Yeah.
And that's prevalent in our world. And I mean, probably in everyone's life. I know the trauma that I've dealt with, there was my version, what I remembered, my experience, how I processed it. But then there was reality, which I may or may not even ever know. And then there's how other people perceive that, like talking with siblings of, you growing up in the same house, how can you have different stories? But it's true. It's like you have to deal with how you processed it, which is what you had to do, which you developed PTSD after this. And as we were talking ahead of time, PTSD wasn't a term back then.
Yep.
But still, you had it. So how did you know there was something wrong? How did it present itself in your life that you're like, something is not right? And then how did you get to know it was PTSD? Did that even matter to label it? Because sometimes it doesn't even matter. So
Yeah, I mean, by the time I got to it, it didn't matter as a label, but I knew pretty early on. There was, when I got back to school, there's a math test on Friday, and this is kind of one of my strongest memories, posts returning. And like I said earlier, I was in a gifted program, so school came really easily to me, even to a fault. I wasn't doing homework, I didn't develop
Mhm.
some of those skills. um, I got a 0 on that math test, and I was usually getting perfect.
How did
And
your teacher say something to you? Were they concerned?
yeah, she was definitely concerned, and I had
I mean,
really,
that's like a big difference.
yeah.
A zero is a long way away from, an A gifted.
Yeah. And, I mean, I had some very, very typical teen things. So, I was there saying, no, I'm not going to do homework. This is too easy. And so I was a little bit in her face often,
Mhm.
with attitude, right?
You had attitude? You were a teenager? Teenagers have attitude, really?
Like, surprise, surprise, right? So she did check in. She was really quite wonderful, but I wasn't able to receive any help. Like, I just said I was fine.
Oh,
Like, there's my brain, and there's how I'm attempting to cope with, like, the very worst thing that's ever happened to me, and everybody's seen it on the news, and I say, yeah, I'm good. And she said, yeah, but,
I
like,
don't
do you
think so.
want to, sit down, and we'll take you through the test again? You don't have to talk to me, but, and it's like, no, no, I'm good. I'll take the 0, doesn't matter. I didn't have the capacity to even feel what I was feeling.
Right. And even though you were 16, that's another good place to pause here.
Yeah.
Different things that I catch along the way. The more I do what I do, the more I identify little things that can help people go, oh, like you were 16. People at 16 have a tendency, hence the attitude, to think they're all grown up and perfectly developed, but you're still in developmental stage. The brain is not done developing. And when we look back at our lives as adults, we look back at them as adults. We
Hmm.
don't look back at them with the same mental capacity we had then. It's like, just want to bring up this age 16 because I brought it up before in other interviews about how I had things when I was 6 and when I was 10 and when I was 11, and how I've dealt with that is to be able to perceive it as a child is to look at a child I know, a grandchild, a neighbor, a niece, nephew, whatever, that's at that age, and imagine them going through that. Well, the
Oh,
same thing with a 16-year-old. They're so close to adulthood that it's, I think, too easy to dismiss it, like you dismissed it. Oh,
yeah.
I'm fine. I'm fine. And oh, I was 16. Oh, I was 16. You were not done. If you had something happen at 16, you listen, and you were 16, you were 17, even 18. Brains aren't done.
Mhm.
So pause and take a look at your life because you're worth it, and because you matter. And keep listening to what Michael has to say here.
And it was interesting because she wasn't the only one. There was, again, who had been my football coach and my basketball coach. His wife also taught our school and taught in the English department, and I guess she didn't bother speaking to me. It must have gotten around in the staff meetings or in dinner at home or something, because the coach came over and he says, "Come on, let's go for a walk, or do you want to drive home, or do you want anything like that?" And I said, "No, I'm good." And he said, "Look, you're not good. This is, I hear you're transferring schools now. You're part of the team. I'm not going to block you from doing that, but I think you'd be better to stay here because we know you and we can help." And, so there was, like, those are two that stood out, but I do know that other teachers did speak to me, and I just refused to help.
Wow.
And
Wow. That's like there's people who don't have that reaching out. And then you
yeah,
had that reaching out. And it's like sort of like I'm seeing different responses because I didn't have support or reaching out in all the different things in my life. And my grandson is going through some things, and I see that just the surrounding of support. And
yeah.
then I hadn't considered the middle ground of someone trying to help is like, no, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. It's like, wow. So how long did this refusal for help go on?
Oh, good couple years.
Which is probably partly adolescence.
Partly adolescence and partly, kind of enculturation, like the way that we're raised. And, I was absolutely raised in a place where being a man meant not crying. Well, I'd already cried, so that was a mistake. And not being vulnerable and not being weak. And And so, my self-talk at that point in time was based around being Rambo or something else that I'd seen, Terminator, or those movies might have come after, they might have come before, but that was what
That
was
mentality. I get that.
yeah,
Whoever was the hero of the day.
yeah, show no weakness, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, whether
I
it's,
mean,
the Masters of the Universe or John Wayne or, whoever the Marvel people are now, it's like whatever generation it's in, there's a hero of the day.
and I think that hero is really wonderful, and it's some piece of my work is the hero's journey. But at that place in time, I wasn't the hero, because truly, to get back to how do I know I have PTSD? Well, I'm avoiding contact, right? So there's going to be an avoidant piece. I'm denying my own feelings. I'm, at that point in time, I lost cognitive capacity. So my brain was so busy trying to process the emotional situation I was in, it couldn't do normal everyday functions like a math test.
Yeah.
To my normal ability, whatever that happened to be. Now we know in concussion, they'll go make them do some tests afterwards, and we're seeing, oh yeah, the brain, like, ooh, these are things that are automatic. And PTSD, when you're diagnosed now, they'll just take you through some cognitive tests, and they'll take you through some memory tests. Didn't have that at the time. Wasn't available. And even if it was, I probably would have run away from it, because I did actually switch high schools.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. So how did you finally overcome that? How did you finally address that and get to the other side of healing? One thing I mentioned was your warrior mindset.
Yeah, well, it kind of came the wrong way, I think. Is you start doing the wrong thing, you
It
start
came.
doing it. Yeah. So I started missing more and more school, because I was in this anonymous situation where I wasn't being seen, which is kind of where I was psychologically at. I didn't want to be looked at. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want people coming up and trying to give me a hug or any of those kinds of things. Basically, because I probably would have broken down into a puddle of tears, and inside I was shaking all the time. The world was no longer safe to me.
Right.
That was destroyed. So I was in a state of fear all the time. My back was kind of all tensed up, and I don't know if your listeners can see this, but it's like my shoulders were directly attached to my ears. I was in this kind of fear pose.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that I was walking around in the world in a different way, but I was. And it was only because I started missing more and more school that my mom spoke to a friend who knew somebody who was a career counselor, that I went and got a little bit of help. And I mean, she just confronted me. She said, you're destroying your life. Like, until you figure out that all this anger you've got going on, plus whatever's underneath it, because she didn't know the story, until you figure out that you're destroying your own life and that has a value to you, you're not going to get any help.
Wow. So she probably chalked up a lot of what you were dealing with to just adolescence.
Yep.
Wow. You were so good at hiding it. And that's something we do with trauma. We tend to hide it due to shame and fear. Wow.
Shame, fear, and I was very typically male. I've been on other podcasts to say, like, as men, we've got a little bit of an issue, because we're allowed 3 feelings.
Mhm.
We're allowed to be hungry, horny,
And angry.
Third one, oh yeah, angry. Yeah. See, I even blocked it out right here and now.
See, that's just so wrong. That's just so wrong. We have so many more feelings within us. So I am very glad that you have addressed that and you have gotten to the other side of that. And now you're helping other people. And you talk about people's uncovering their deep story.
Yeah.
Their myth, their personal myth. Can you talk about that? Does that tie into what you were hiding with that there?
Yeah, so this ties directly together. So, from that woman, I took a referral to go to, what was called Life Stream. It was a weekend workshop on, basically pulling yourself together and crying your tears and feeling your feelings. But it was also highly focused on, becoming your best self. That was my first exposure to that.
Wonderful that they even had something like that.
Yeah, and lucky that I finally, cracked, as it were, and said yes to some help.
Yeah.
Right? And
it didn't sound like your mom really gave you an out, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, my mom was probably suffering twice as much. She'd lost a brother and her family was all suffering and all of those kinds of things, trying to raise kids. And,
She
you
was
know,
suffering different. I wouldn't measure it. That's one thing I learned in reconnecting with my mother in the losses that we went through is, like you said, she lost her brother. You
yeah,
lost your uncle. Those are different relationships.
yeah,
They're not worse, or they're just different. And so
yeah.
they have to be processed differently. It doesn't make one better, worse, or easier, harder than the other. They're just different.
And, speaking to my dad recently, he said, for years, he said, I couldn't hear a helicopter without kind of tensing up and looking where an attack was coming from
Oh, yeah.
because helicopters flew overhead, right? Um, so there's PTSD probably in our entire family or extended family, like in varying forms, right?
Mhm.
I got into therapy shortly after that course. Um, and getting into my own deep story, I had to first start to differentiate as like, oh, what kind of anger am I having? And it's like, okay, well, for me, a lot of it was grief anger. So I'm actually feeling sad. I'm actually feeling like a huge loss. Oh, but the way I'm able to express it, because the way that I know how I was taught, and the only available acceptable way is to be angry about something at someone or a
Mm.
situation.
Or could it be, just for the sake of people listening, to explore the feelings and how they present themselves? Could you have been angry that you were sad?
Yes. So there was my internal experience of it and not wanting to have that feeling.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And then there was the socially acceptable piece. It's like you kind
right.
of got your work cut out for you if you've only got anger as a channel of safety to unpack it, both internally and
Right.
externally. So you're exactly right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very normal feeling, a very normal part of grief. When you lose people, sometimes people get angry at the person for dying. You know,
Absolutely.
if they committed suicide, that's a little bit different because they actually played a role. But and not to get off into condemning them either, because they have their reasons and
Wonderful.
their
Yeah.
causes there, which is a whole different complexity. But when someone has died of a heart attack or a car accident or something where they had no place, and it's like, well, you left me. Well,
Yeah.
that anger, we feel it and it has to go somewhere. So we have to put it somewhere and deal with it and like put it in the blender and process it.
Absolutely. And kind of a funny thing that it's actually working well with you and I because we both got good senses of humor, but we're laughing and we're somehow able to keep this light, even though it's like a super heavy topic.
Mhm.
And humor was another thing that absolutely saved me because you can be angry and tell a joke, or you can be sad and tell a joke, and you can kind of get through the moment. And that was something that really, really helped me kind of get on track to, the like what we're calling the warrior mindset and actually taking charge of my own life. Like there I
Mhm.
was self-destructing as a
Yeah.
habit
Mhm.
and had to break that and say, oh, I can once again remember that there were things I wanted to do in life. Like I wanted to graduate high school early. I wanted to go to university. Those things all disappeared as part of my PTSD like
Yeah.
post-trauma symptoms. And I had to shed some tears. I had to yell and shout and get some of the anger that was there. And then I had to take responsibility for my own life, which was one part adolescence, not really being attuned to that, but one part, um, my early childhood, my middle childhood, and then the terrible incident all combined.
Mhm.
For whatever reason, I didn't have the message. This was my life. I mattered. The world needed me to use my gifts,
Mhm.
and that I would like my life a lot better if I did.
Yes. This is so true. Yes. You
Like,
will like your life better if you deal with the issues. Definitely.
and use your gifts. Like it seemed like just unfathomable to me at that time, right?
Right.
Getting into therapy and then discovering things like Joseph Campbell, who was all over the place. So one of the things I did grow up on also was Star Wars franchise, and Joseph Campbell, who some people may not have heard of him, Hero with a Thousand Faces, and many other books, helped them make the Star Wars universe make sense so that it was a mythology that people could believe.
Mhm.
And I started to realize, oh, so all the major world religions have stories like this. Oh, and before, some that are just we call mythologies or fairy tales. There's all stories that inform our lives, not in a rational way, but they really help with like this illogical stuff, this feeling stuff that I didn't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
Turns out myths, stories, and for me, I had a lot of dreams, were all interconnected, and those were much better ways to learn to process through feelings and start to get shit done in life, if I could say that.
You can.
Right? So it was kind of a switch from being a victim to having the capacity to kick ass and start to discover myself. And you say, like, well, how long were you on that path? Well, I did have to go through kind of like the hero journey, but I was doing lots of therapy. And then I got into psychology in university, and that worked really well. And I had this really fortunate series of events where I taught first year psychology. Right after my undergraduate, I was a faculty replacement. I didn't get to keep that job, no PhD. He's like, thank you very much. You did wonderful, but on you go.
We need those letters.
We need those letters, right? We were in a bit of a spot. You're in the right place, the right time, but away you go.
Yeah, so
And
you
then
were fortunate to have that for that period of time, but
oh, it's fantastic.
I understand they have to have their letters, but letters are not always something that validates someone's wisdom. People can have letters and be not very smart. I've had teachers, I know people who have gone to school. It's like these people have all these letters, but this person has lived it. And I'm learning so much more from the one who has lived it.
Yep. And I think both really have their place. Like we need to do our learning. We need to do our detailed studies. They give those PhDs for a reason. And most people that even try don't get through. Like it's really hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, learning is something we should do our whole life. I'm reading a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf. I don't know if you know her. She's a famous or a brilliant neuroscientist. I'm reading her book called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess.
Wow.
One of the things she talks about is learning, continuing to learn. She said, if we stop learning, it damages our brain, damages the brain. So keeping learning, just you don't have to go to school, just learning something where reading can come in. So listener, if you've been not learning anything, start learning something. Pick up a book. Doesn't have to be go to school. Pick up a book and start learning something new and feed your brain.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that one, but you said it perfectly.
Well, you have a book. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, my book, for those of us who might be watching in right now, is called The Myth-Guided Mind. I'm just holding it up. And
what's the subtitle?
Subtitle, Unleash Your God-Given Genius at Work and at Home.
Wonderful.
And that kind of highlights, to go back to one piece of that other style of learning where you're on the wisdom path. Mm-hmm. So my actual deep story was about being a healer. I had it in my mind, like all those TV superheroes that I was going to be, this warrior type. Well, actually, I was much better at, reading, learning, teaching. And as it turns out, I became a psychotherapist and then later became a craniosacrotherapist. I was actually on the path of being a healer. Like that's where my true kind of genius lies on this planet, is being with people and helping them along. And, then they get to go and conquer the world or something. And but I'm doing my part, as it were. Oh. The thing that's kind of coming into my life now is about this wisdom piece that you mentioned. And I think you got to reach a certain age to start to value it. There's a lot more to be said about that in our world of fiction than there is most times in the nonfiction world, even though I tend to read more nonfiction than fiction. And again, in these traditions, and it's like, go and speak to your grandmother, I used to tell clients, is like, ask them what it was like to have a hard life. And clients be blown away. And that was kind of the first.
I just did a search through my Bible, looking through all the different verses about growing old and different things and how it could relate to it, what it had to say about that. It talks about wisdom is supposed to come with age. That is supposed to come and to go and talk to all the different generations and to ask them. So that goes right into line with what you tell your clients to do.
Yeah, but I think you've got it right. Like you've gone and actively gone to your source. I mean, you've gone to the Bible and said, and you've looked through, and you're seeking out, where does wisdom come from? It's like, oh, we've known for thousands of years, right? And luckily we had people writing it down.
Mhm.
And now we've got this incredibly rich source. But there is a thing where it also is another thing that's not kind of cultivated in our society for whatever reason, our consumer society and all those things. I'm a lover of tech, but it does bad things for our capacity to focus and so on, right? And actually into this next phase of life, when what we're supposed to do as middle and older adults is learn to be wise and share it.
Mhm. Well, that's one thing, like you said, I went to the source in that. Some things are written. I think podcasts, that's why I love interviewing people like you and people sharing their stories.
Yeah.
They get to share things that people have never heard before, how people have processed that, what they have gone through. Like you had gone to Ireland all these different times, and I'm just like, wow. And other people, some people, they've never been outside their city, and other people, they have traveled the world. And just to wrap your head around that there are people in all those different ways.
Yeah.
It's for us to enlarge our world capacity and our mentality and our perspective that the world is much bigger than me. It's much bigger than my neighborhood. The world is a very large place.
And just having that understanding can be so helpful when we're down.
Mhm.
It can give us perspective on our problems, and we could even be depressed or, having been there and done that. It can be very bad. It can be really dark days if we've had things go wrong in life, or sometimes even though we seemingly haven't. But if we can get that perspective, and there's a whole literature on the value of awe, like, wow, look at that sunset. You suddenly
Yes.
feel
Wonder. That sense
wonder,
of
right?
wonder. Yes.
And you can have it in a conversation like what we're having today. I was like, oh, this is awesome. This conversation's amazing. Like, let's keep going, right? And
I'm
I,
having a fabulous time.
I hope our
So
listeners are too, because like I'm just sitting here enjoying myself, right? Well, yeah, these are the worst things that have happened, but look at how I grew because of that day. Like my life took on a completely different path where I had to heal. And who knows, maybe I would have just gone on and got my scholarships and gone into chemistry and done that for a living, but I would have missed out.
Mhm.
I would have missed out on all of the people whose lives I've touched.
Yeah, I remember reading your bio that you have cycled through different jobs. Like you've been a butcher, a banker, and I wanted to go to butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker in my head kind of thing. It's like, how did you do all these different things? And do those feed into what you do now?
I think they all do, and there are kind of these things that you see. Certain shamanic traditions will have um, people that are trained to be shamans will actually go and live in the different aspects of the community and take that experience so they really get what it's like to be that person. This is like empathy, but on steroids. You actually go and live the life. You just don't say, oh, tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah,
What
walk a mile in my shoes.
like you literally go walk a mile in those shoes before you get to kind of complete your shaman training. And I don't think I was doing that consciously, but I did need day jobs. I did need to figure things out. Real life was harder than I thought. I mean, again, a typical teenage kind of thing is like, I had to make
That's
ends
why they
meet
get to be adults. We go, well, I don't like this adulting thing. I'm going to go
at
back to
all.
recess.
Right?
Oh boy, yeah.
Well, I did have to support my studies, and being a psychotherapist at that time, it was a mentorship style training. It wasn't a go and get a post-secondary education followed by graduate degrees. At least up here, it is now. There's a very normal path, but at the time, it was a much more mentorship style. And so I needed day jobs, but I was always, again, I was lucky to be blessed with gifts. I could swing a hammer, I could, I could do a couple of figures in my head, like I could do some of those things. And so I did jobs. Some were, early on, I had jobs that I hated, and they were the only ones that were available. There were different economic circumstances that we all went through. There were good years and bad. But as life went on, I got better and better at my craft. And so I got to um, switch into jobs where I was truly helping people and really learning a lot. You mentioned being a butcher. That little grocery store I worked at We had people like the Governor General of Canada were coming in as customers, people that ran businesses, university professors. So it was a kind of a thing. And we touched on this a little bit ago. It's like, if you're not learning, you're making a mistake. I could have been miserable there and just said, oh, I've got to make another sandwich. But just by having, someone say hello to me across from the counter and over time and meeting them every week, I made friendships with people whose lives were very different than my own, like middle-class suburban lifestyle, a father who was doing blue collar work and a mom who got laid off and had to restart her career. I didn't really have any experience of people that did other jobs. And so I was able to learn very directly while working at a meat counter what it takes to become a professor, what it takes to become a world famous author. Margaret Atwood, you might have heard of her, and her husband, Graham Greene, used to come into the store and he'd buy lamb chops. And, so I had the opportunity to talk to them and get to know them and read their books. John Ralston Saul was another one.
I want to pause here because I'm seeing something. Because there's a time to suck it up and do something hard.
Yep.
And there's a time to move past that. Because people will get stuck in it. You need to just suck it up and just get over it. And so they sweep everything under the rug. But there's a time to work hard and do something that you don't want to do, something that is difficult. Like my husband delivered pizzas when he was laid off before, and that's not what he wanted to do when he grew up. So kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do that, but that doesn't mean you have to stay there. Still, you can learn something from that place, like you learned from that place, which I think this is a perfect segue into something. I don't want to lose time and not be able to touch on it. You are focusing now on the Great Resignation, helping people with that. That's a very current issue going on. Please tell us why you went into that, and then, how you can help people in this area before we're going to have to tie this up. We're having so much fun. We could talk for the rest of the day.
We probably could. We can figure that out another time or whatever, but this is having the best time here. Great resignation came upon us. I mean, I'm almost one who did that. I was a successful therapist and sitting at home, and COVID's happening, and I was a naysayer. It's like, no, you have to do therapy. You got to be face to face, or people won't be able to feel. And it turns out it's all wrong. Some people that need it that way. There's a lot more that can do it like we do. But I had a client say to me, it's like, you've helped me so much. You've got to do something to get your word out there. And I was like, oh, well, I can't write. And he's like, did you just say can't to me?
You go.
It's like,
we can learn from anyone if we'll listen.
So, sorted out how to find a ghostwriter and a publisher and an editor and all of those things. And it was basically from him burning me on. But there I was in kind of the first wave of the Great Resignation, becoming a coach and an author, because I realized I'd stopped growing. I was getting up to be a master of my craft, but I was also in a little bit of a rut. And I didn't know it. And what's happening all over, these two countries, and I think all over the whole world, is people are realizing, wow, I've been at this job for a long, long time. It doesn't really resonate with my values. Or I've been doing all these really hard things and we're being called to come back into the office, but I've actually found a way to make a better life by working from anywhere or working from home, or I don't have childcare costs. It initially drove me insane. A lot of people, really a lot of people, and I'm sure some, are just taking a moment to pause and really reflect on, what am I doing here on this earth? And is this what I need to be doing with the vast majority of my time, which is our work?
Yeah, so it's like they got a new view. The world just forced them to see a new view. And perhaps they've been sucking it up for, what they are esteeming now as too long.
Yep. And so I end up in these conversations where some people are like, yeah, I actually don't want to quit, but I need to be learning more in my situation. And that's a little bit like my grocery store example. I could have been miserable and just with my head down, but I chose to look up and make some friends across the way, and mind-blowing experiences and conversations result, right? So that's where we can bring attitude to absolutely everything and gain from it. And then there are other people like, no, this is definitely wrong. I have to quit. There's a bad situation. There's no amount of money.
Make it stop. Make it stop. Make it stop.
and they quit. And then it's like, but now what?
I still have bills to pay. Wait a minute.
yeah, I worked at the red team. Now I got to go work for the green team and hope that it's a little better because my skill set's the same and I haven't up leveled, and hopefully they'll pay me more to switch. And that works a little bit, but it's like people are even quitting a second round, and some people are getting what we're calling the great rebound. So they've gone over to somewhere else. They've realized, uh-oh, somebody quit this job because it's so terrible they couldn't take it. That's why it was open when I got here.
Oh, no.
Worse than the one that I have. I got to call my old boss and see if I can get back in, right? We got kind of chaos for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think, with everything that we've had, people are reevaluating, and we have the good fortune to be able to say, is there a better way for me to make a living right now?
Mhm. Wow. So that sounds very intuitive, and like you would be so helpful for people. And pause here. If you're going through this, you're like, hey, wait, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. You need to reach out here to Michael and get some help. So Michael, how can people connect with you? How can they get coaching from you or connect with you in whatever way that they can get the help they need?
Yeah, so the website is michaelhynes.ca, and that's Hynes. Or you can email me at coach@michaelhynes.ca. And where I've got the most presence is over on LinkedIn. So I think you've got that in the show notes. You see the more personal side, Instagram and Facebook. I'm not on there all that often, but you can find me and shoot me a message on any of those too. And and listen for more podcasts. I'm active on that circuit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I have just thoroughly enjoyed this today, Michael. Thank you for being with us and sharing your story, and for all the laughing too.
Yes.
This has been so filled with laughter. I know people will enjoy it. So you're listening, you need some help. You just pause, do something about it. Don't say, no, I'm good. Stop doing that and get some help. Whether you're male or female, doesn't matter. Get help. So until next time, I'm Danielle Bernack from daniellebernack.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Mwah.